What if the biggest thing standing between you and the life you want isn't failure, but the stories you've been telling yourself? And what if I told you that some of the biggest battles we face in life don't happen in boardrooms, classrooms, or even in public? They happen quietly in our minds, in our homes, in our relationships, and in the dreams we keep putting off until tomorrow. Hey Verify fam, welcome back to another episode of the Verify Radio Show. Today feels a little different. Instead of diving into a brand new topic, I want to take a walk back through some of the conversations we've shared together. Some of these episodes sparked debate, some made people uncomfortable, and some made people think, and some reminded us that maybe we're all carrying more than we let on. If you are new to the show, consider this your introduction to what the Verify Radio Show is all about. And if you have been here from the beginning, consider this a reminder of just how far we've come. Let's talk about it. One of the most talked about conversation was about something called soft living. That episode was titled Soft Living: The Quiet Rebellion Against Burnout Culture. Now, before anyone rolls their eyes and says, "Here we go again, another social media trend," hear me out. Soft living isn't about being lazy. It's not about avoiding responsibility. It's about questioning why so many of us have been taught that our value is tied to how exhausted we are. Think about it. How many times have you heard someone proudly say, "I'm running on 4 hours of sleep. I haven't had a day off in weeks. I'm so busy." Somehow, exhaustion became a badge of honor. But what if rest isn't weakness? What if protecting your peace isn't selfish? What if slowing down actually helps you move further? That episode challenged us to stop glorifying burnout and start prioritizing our well being. Because if your success cost you your mental health, your physical health, your family, and your joy, was it really success at all? Another powerful conversation was centered around something that stops millions of people every year: doubt. Not failure, not lack of talent, not lack of opportunity, doubt. That episode was titled Start Where You Are: Dreams Over Doubt. It was one of my favorite episodes. And it was centered around the voice that says to you, "You're too old, you're too late, someone else is already doing it. Why do you think, or who do you think you are?" And the reality is that most dreams don't die because they weren't possible. They die because people convinced themselves they weren't worthy. I shared my own journey of taking chances, trying new things, stepping into unfamiliar spaces, and realizing that no one begins as an expert. Every successful person started somewhere. Every author wrote a first page. Every entrepreneur had a first customer. Every speaker had a first audience. The hardest step is often simply starting. And then we talked about vision. This episode was titled Clarifying Your Vision. Not your eyesight, but your vision. Knowing where you're trying to go. Because here's the truth: there's always a verified truth, Verify fam. You can work hard every single day and still end up somewhere you never intended to be if you don't know where you are headed. Many people have goals, but fewer people have clarity. And without clarity, Distractions start looking like opportunities. Other people's opinions start sounding like directions. Before long, you're living someone else's dream instead of your own. That conversation challenged listeners to define success for themselves, not society's version, not social media's version, their version. Now, let's talk about the episode that stirred up some strong reactions: quiet quitting. The phrase itself created controversy. Some people called it laziness, others called it survival. But underneath all the headlines was a deeper question: what happens when people stop feeling valued? When workers stop feeling seen, when effort goes unnoticed for years. Whether you agree or disagree with the concept, the conversation forced us to examine workplace culture, expectations, and the growing disconnect between employees and employers, because sometimes people don't quit jobs, they quit environments. Then we explore something many of us desperately need but rarely allow ourselves: micro rest days. Not vacations, not expensive getaways, just intentional moments to breathe. A few hours, a quiet afternoon, time away from constant notifications, time away from obligations, time away from being everything for everyone. We live in a culture that celebrates productivity, but we rarely celebrate recovery. And yet, every machine needs maintenance. Every athlete needs recovery. Every mind needs rest. Why should we be any different? And this was one of my favorite topics. And one of my favorite topics, one of my favorite conversations, and it was about pivoting, because life rarely follows the blueprint we imagine. Sometimes the business doesn't take off, sometimes the relationship ends, sometimes the career path changes, sometimes plan A becomes plan B, then plan C, then plan D, and that's okay. I want to remind everyone listening today: you are allowed to pivot. In fact, you may need to pivot several times. Pivoting isn't failure, it's information, it's learning, it's growth, it's adopting. And perhaps most importantly, asking for help during those pivots should never come with shame. Too many people suffer because their ego won't let them ask questions. Too many people struggle in silence because they think independence means doing everything alone. It doesn't. Some of the strongest people you will ever meet are the ones who know when to raise their hand and say, I need help. There is strength in humility. There is power in learning from others. And there is absolutely nothing wrong with changing directions when the road you're on isn't taking you where you want to go. This conversation shifted, and I talked about something that I was kind of afraid to talk about, but I decided to challenge myself and do it anyways. This conversation hits close to home for many listeners. This segment was titled Men and Therapy: Breaking the Silence. For generations, men have been handed the same script: be tough, be strong, don't cry, handle it yourself. But what happens when life becomes too heavy to carry alone? What happens when the stress, anxiety, grief, and pressure begins to pile up? Many men have been taught to suffer quietly, to wear a smile while drowning inside. That episode wasn't about weakness, it was about courage, because sometimes courage looks less like fighting and more like speaking. less like hiding and more like healing. It was a great conversation. I believe on this episode, I was on live and I had a colleague of mine and we had a wonderful conversation. And I think this is something that I'm going to explore some more on another episode, another segment of the Verify radio show. One thing we discovered throughout many of these conversations is that people are carrying invisible burdens. And this episode was titled Shame, Pretending, and the Hidden Weight. The shame of failure, the shame of not meeting expectations, the shame of asking for help, the shame of struggling. And because of that shame, people become performers. They pretend, they smile, they say they're fine, they keep moving. Meanwhile, they are exhausted. One of the biggest lessons from this show has been this. You don't have to pretend your way through life. You don't have to carry every burden alone. And you certainly don't need to suffer in silence to prove your worth. And then my episodes and conversations shifted. I started doing some lives, daily lives they were, and I discovered a wonderful blog page. It's called Mothering and Soft Rage. And it was one of the most emotional discussions I've had on the show. It was centered around mothers, specifically the emotional labor many mothers carry every day. I talked about the invisible responsibilities, the constant caregiving, the endless mental checklist, the expectations, the pressure, and what happens when all that effort goes unseen. We talked about soft rage, the quiet frustration that builds when someone gives and gives and gives, but rarely receives support in return. That conversation wasn't about blame. It was about understanding, because behind many strong people is often a level of sacrifice that few ever notice. I encouraged persons to check out the blog Mothering and Soft Rage. And one of the main thing that I was doing on the episodes that I was doing was to encourage this person, this mother, to continue writing, to continue sharing their story. And I think I'm going to continue with the episode and, share what the blog was all about. But you can check it out yourself. Now, if you've been listening carefully, you've noticed something. All of these conversations are connected. Burnout, dreams, purpose, mental health, workplace culture, family dynamics, growth. They all come back to one thing. How do we build a better life while staying true to ourselves? And that's exactly why I'm excited to tell you that many of these segments will be returning very soon. We're going deeper. We're asking tougher questions. We're challenging old beliefs, and we're creating more space for honest conversations that matter. Before I go, I want to leave you with one final thought. Accountability. Not the kind where someone else holds you accountable. The kind where you look yourself in the mirror. The kind where you ask, am I truly committed to the life I say I want? Am I putting action behind my dreams? Am I making excuses? Am I allowing fear to make my decisions? The truth is that nobody can want your dream more than you do. Nobody can build your vision for you. Nobody can take the steps that only you are capable of taking. Will there be setbacks? Absolutely. Will there be pivots? Most definitely. Without question, you are going to be pivoting. Will there be moments where you feel like giving up? That's exactly how I feel every single day, right? You are going to feel like giving up. But don't confuse difficulty with impossibility. Stand your ground, protect your vision, adjust your path when necessary. Pivot. Pivot if you want. Ask for help when needed and keep moving forward because the life you're trying to build deserves commitment. And more importantly, you deserve the chance to see what happens when you refuse to quit. I am Gavin, and I am the host of the Verify Radio Show. Until next time, keep asking questions, keep seeking truth, and keep verifying the world around you. And I am going to end with the question that I ask. What if the biggest thing standing between you and the life you want isn't failure, but the stories you've been telling yourself?